Story 1. In theory, how do you implement it? Does it require me to use my government identification to access the internet? I want less surveillance, not more. Story 2. Yes. Most platforms require users to be over 13, but children half that age are addicted to it. The Online Safety Act is not the solution. We need to treat it like we did smoking and make it socially unacceptable for children to be on social media and for parents to allow them on it. Parents should face similar consequences as they would if their child is skipping school, smoking, or engaging in antisocial behavior. It will take time, but if we act on this, things will change. Story 3. Let's start with the basics. How do you define social media? Is YouTube social media? Is Reddit? Are forums like Stack Exchange or GitHub social media? How about online video games? Niche platforms for marginalized and vulnerable populations? Then how do you enforce it? Is the burden for age verification on each platform? How does Reddit remain anonymous? Are we giving our social security numbers to every company we interact with? Our driver's licenses? Can we trust 4chan to be good stewards of our personally identifiable information? What happens when children find themselves on unsavory sites that decide they do not want to comply, that do not have robust moderation or enforcement protocols? Banning porn does nothing but push users to less reputable sites that are not willing to comply with the law. Why is social media different? Social media is frequently used by lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and other children to connect with each other and find their voices. Are we going to take that away from them? Are we going to require that those populations above 14 identify themselves in ways that might put them at risk of being outed to a government that does not want them to exist? In many ways, age verification does nothing to protect people and everything to harm privacy and freedoms. Story 4. There is no safe way for the government to do it, so no, I do not approve of the government doing it. What parents do regarding this and their children is their business. Story 5. I don't, because in this day and age, young people need to know how to protect themselves and understand how challenging the world, including social media, can be. We are definitely not in the 1980s anymore. Also, the more technologically savvy you are, the better off you are. Social media, despite its problems, helps develop social and technological awareness. The only thing I would do is tell cautionary tales, teach my child not to do dangerous dares, and try not to be overprotective. Story 6. I understand that social media can have adverse effects on people, but unfortunately, I do not think there is any way to put the genie back in the bottle on this one. Virtual private networks are incredibly easy to get and would easily circumvent any blocking in this country. Additionally, I wonder how many parents will let their children log in when they are tired and just want them to be quiet. The number of times I have seen parents give young children their phone to watch a movie or play games is beyond counting. Finally, prohibition never works. We ban cigarettes for those under 18, yet children are still smoking. The same applies to alcohol and everything else. The United States introduced prohibition into their constitution, but people still found ways to get alcohol. The best way to manage things like this is not through prohibition but through harm minimization. Story 7. No. It is the parents' job to control it. Also, apparently in the United States, they are using artificial intelligence to verify the age of people on YouTube. Story 8. Not in the way the United Kingdom has just done it. The government and corporations should not invade the privacy of their citizens to compensate for the failures of bad parents. Story 9. No, what kind of police state do you want to live in? Do you feel like verifying your identity every time you want to use the internet? Story 10. No, I do not think social media should be banned by governments. It should be up to parents to guide their children on the dangers of social media and the internet. When governments get involved, they often find ways to exert more control over people. First it is social media, then games, music, books, and even the way you talk, dress, eat, and think, all under the guise of protecting children or society. Story 11. I would agree, but I cannot in good conscience because many children live in abusive or unsupportive home environments. Social media serves as a valuable escape and a way to privately reach out to friends and trusted individuals. Story 12. No, there is not a good way to implement this kind of ban. Also, I think it should be a parent's decision as to what content their child should and should not have access to. Children develop at different rates, and their parents can decide when their child is ready for the internet better than a generalized rule ever could. Story 13. Even if the entire age verification process were implemented perfectly with no security issues, I still would not think it was a good choice. Although social media has caused problems for some people, it has also brought many benefits to others. What needs to be regulated is how people use social media, such as parents teaching and actively monitoring their children's activities. Social media is not inherently bad. Story 14. Ban phones from schools and classrooms. Otherwise, it will require a cultural shift of parents actually parenting instead of handing their toddler a tablet as soon as they can be entertained by it. Any laws requiring identification or verification should be avoided. Story 15. No, because it does not work anyway, and instead you encourage teenagers to lie and pretend to be adults. Parents should simply parent their children. Story 16. I do not really support this. Those years are probably the most social you will ever be, and social media can help with that in this day and age. You can put measures in place to protect them, sure, but outright banning it? Story 17. No, because we do not live in a world where anyone proposing this type of legislation cares about protecting children. Every one of these proposals is a power grab that will be used to further eliminate privacy and control free speech. The only way to truly identify a person's age is to require personally identifying information in the form of photos, videos, or government-issued identification. We are seeing this happen at a rapid pace in the United States right now, and there are very serious consequences to attaching your online profiles to personally identifying information. Story 18. No, I support parents actually parenting. We are allowing serious government overreach because people are too lazy to look after their children and monitor what they are doing. Story 19. Good in theory, but to enforce, they might require people to hand over their identification cards to social media companies, and I value my privacy. Maybe we should instead have parents actually parent their children instead of relying on the government for it. Story 20. Probably. I listened to a podcast once that made the point that we massively restrict all these things that we know are bad for kids, alcohol, tobacco, and so on. But when it comes to social media, we do nothing despite research showing a clear link between social media use and child and adolescent suicide. The notion that it is not worth bothering just because they will find a way to access it is nonsensical. By that logic, we should hand the kids each a bottle of whiskey and a cigarette and tell them to have a great time. Story 21. In theory, yes. Social media, in my opinion, is like a drug, one to be used responsibly when you have a level of brain development that understands the impact it is having. In practice, no. There is no feasible way at this stage to control it without giving up certain privacies to organizations and authorities that I do not believe have our best interests in mind. Story 22. I don't support unfeasible or feel-good laws. They are a waste of time, selectively enforced, and ultimately just plain unwise. Should people under 14 be on social media? Probably not, given the current trends. Can anyone outside the child's school, home, or social circle stop it? No. Accountability for a child starts and ends with their parents. If a parent is unwilling to parent, no amount of social media bans, teachers, or schools will fix the issue. Until parents return to limiting screen time and actively managing their children, attempts to ban children from social media are a waste of time and resources because they will simply create fake profiles and hide it further. In summary, parents need to parent. Government authorities and social media groups cannot come into your home and take away a child's devices. Ultimately, this is a consequence of parents being unwilling or unable to step away from the workplace to actively parent. This issue stems from corporate policies and government support of work-intensive culture demanding more work, longer hours, and less compensation. If single-income households were more feasible and parents were more able to actively supervise their children, it would be a different situation. However, that topic is unrelated to this question. Story 23. I cannot think of any technical measure that will actually work for this. Requesting major platforms to demand identification, particularly in a way that requires personal legal information, will simply cause people to leave for less authoritarian options. Story 24. I do not need people telling me what I can and cannot do for my family on the internet. It is not their business. Story 25. Banning internet-related activities due to age does not work, and it is the parents' responsibility. Story 26. Yes. However, my children are already restricted. If you allow your children unrestricted access to the internet, then you are not exercising proper parental responsibility. Story 27. Read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It will show you how harmful social media is. It affects young girls the most. Story 28. Honestly, I support completely dismantling all social media platforms and preventing their return. They are harmful. Facebook and Twitter data centers should be destroyed. Story 29. Overall, the main issue this policy is trying to solve is a community issue. Problems arise when parents are punished if their children are caught outside, when children are expected to enter niche and increasingly curated cultures, and when parents refuse accountability yet want more control over their children's lives. This law is not about helping children. It is about censoring and isolating them. Websites should be allowed to ban underage users. Story 30. Yes, 100%. But 18 would be better. Social-focused media like Instagram and Facebook is a societal cancer. Having seen what just having smartphones has done to a generation, those should be out too. There should be no smartphones until you are 18, only regular phones. That said, I am pretty sure it is all too late. The bar for acceptable human stupidity has been pushed so low by the United States that the entire human species is in danger. Story 31. I support banning social media for anyone under 14 because at that age, children often are not emotionally ready to handle the pressure, comparison, and potential dangers online. Giving them more time to develop offline social skills and confidence can help protect their mental health. Story 32. I have received a lot of criticism for expressing this opinion. People are mistaken if they believe teenagers need constant access to the internet. Story 33. Absolutely not. Being able to navigate social media is now an essential life skill. Banning children from using it will not stop the rest of the world from using it. They need to understand it as adults for everything from maintaining their household to getting a job. Not allowing them to start learning early only puts them at a disadvantage. My parents tried to stop me and my sister from being on the computer all the time because they thought the internet and computers were going to rot our brains, and they wanted us to go outside and play. We learned to bypass the programs they put on the personal computers to limit our screen time. Today, we are both software developers. It would probably be good to have some parental controls to limit certain problematic activities, but a blanket ban will have terrible long-term consequences. Children would start using it in adulthood completely naive, with no supervision and no understanding of the environment they are entering. Story 34. No, I support empowering parents, teachers, community leaders, and role models to teach children how to use the internet responsibly. Story 35. I would love that, but how do you enforce it? I am not using my identification for every website I visit. That is some dystopian behavior. Story 36. When I have had supposed 13-year-olds come on to me and offer to date me at my age, yes, I think there should be a ban. Lucky for them, I would not. Unlucky for them, someone else probably did. Story 37. I have had unrestricted internet access since I was a young child. I am very sure I turned out fine. It is not a matter of if children use the internet, but how they do it. Story 38. Yes, although I think enforcement is practically unlikely or impossible. Artificial intelligence may solve this. I do not think the human brain has evolved to effectively combat the psychological onslaught of social media applications. Story 39. I don't think so. The majority of social interactions happen online nowadays. It is what it is. Also, a legal ban on social media raises issues of free speech. What is social media? Many online games have some form of chat. Should we legally ban children under 14 from playing online games? I understand social media can be unhealthy, but just use an app that limits your time or talk to your children to ensure they engage in healthy habits online. That being said, I am okay with certain sites like Facebook having a user agreement that requires users to be a certain age. Story 40. Banning things does not work. The only possible approach is to educate and hope people make good choices. Story 41. I have two 13-year-olds, and we have explained to them in great detail why they are not allowed to use social media. They do not need it. Story 42. No. And I'm not falling into the "but it's the children" trap either. The current actions are to establish control, and it feels like it's happening everywhere at the same time, from Australia to the European Union, United Kingdom, and United States, as if it were a coordinated effort. You know who has a similar system in place already? China. And it's not working. Parents, older brothers, sisters, friends, and others just create accounts for the children using their own identification. It doesn't work at all, yet costs millions to implement and ultimately leads to more surveillance. Good parenting is what is needed, but frankly, I think many parents should not be parents. They are just bad at it. Story 43. Banning it? No, but I don't think anyone under 15 should be posting. They can scroll, but they shouldn't be posting anything. Story 44. I do not support outright banning it, but I would like to see it moderated to a much greater degree than it is now for children. I would also like people to be made aware of the dangers of the internet, social media, and spending too much time online. Story 45. I fully support it. People under 16 should not be able to use social media. It is clear how damaging it is to children. Story 46. No bans or censorship should ever be required. In a perfect world, parents should manage this themselves. However, some people do not care about their children. Story 47. I do not support banning anything honestly. People who really want it will get it, and society will ostracize those who do anyway if it is not socially acceptable. Bans usually exist only to serve some governmental purpose, not to bring benefit to common people. Story 48. In theory, we should leave it with the parents. Our 10-year-old is not allowed to have social media yet, except for a moderated Discord for him and his friends, which I moderate. The same goes for most things online, including Steam, Roblox, Epic Games, and Fortnite. However, not every parent knows how to do this, and not everyone cares, which might lead children down a bad path. 14 is a bit harsh, though. I can see our child being allowed to have social media at 12 but still supervised. Story 49. Yes, I support banning social media for children under 14, and not in a negative way, but to protect the brain before damage occurs. Here is why. Brains are still developing. Under 14, the brain is still wiring itself. Dopamine from likes, followers, and comments has a strong impact, causing young minds to link self-worth to online validation too early. No filter, full exposure. Algorithms do not differentiate between ages. They provide content that can harm mental health, promote unrealistic beauty standards, or expose children to adult content and misinformation. Cyberbullying is more damaging. At this age, even one mean comment can feel devastating. Constant exposure to curated perfection and trolls causes mental health to decline. Fear of missing out and identity issues. Children are still discovering who they are. Social media rushes this process, encouraging performance rather than authenticity. They should have space to grow with freedom to be awkward, unique, and offline. Story 50. Not a full ban, but at least a heavily censored and restricted one. I want to believe parents will prepare children for internet safety, but more and more children are not truthful about their age and are engaging in trends not meant for them, such as an inappropriate skincare routine or politics. They are better off receiving the censored version, at least until around 13 years old. Story 51. I'm going to say yes. I came to this conclusion just yesterday when I opened a link to Instagram. I have the app but never use it. I haven't scrolled the app in probably 5 years, but the amount of explicit content on the discovery page is surprising. It's 95% just links to OnlyFans-type social media. I couldn't have been trusted with unrestricted access, and I certainly wouldn't grant it to my child. I'm an old man now, though, so what do I know? Story 52. No. I support regulations of a different kind for social media. If it is predatory for children, it is predatory for adults. We need regulations that curb algorithmic manipulation of the feed, especially politically and socially. Story 53. Yes. There is no reason for children to engage in that environment. But how do you enforce it? That is the real question. Story 54. Yes. And for everyone else, while we're at it, let's go back to forums moderated by a couple of enthusiasts in their basements. That had its downsides too, but ruining entire countries was not one of them. Story 55. How about banning advertising to anyone under 18 on social media and bringing back fact-checking? You will never ban children from social media. The best you can do is ban the negative aspects. Story 56. I support regulating social media to outlaw intentionally addictive and harmful algorithms that cause concern when used by children. I also support regulations for social media sites allowing children's accounts, requiring them to follow guidelines including parental controls and oversight. Banning social media outright would lead to either erosion of privacy, as sites require identification, or cause more children to lie about their ages. Story 57. The only way it works is if you do 18 and just sell codes at gas stations and liquor stores for 25 cents. Yes, kids will still find a way around it, but it adds a level of age verification that does not require you to provide your government identification to a social media or adult website. Story 58. I remember when I was younger using the internet, my parents were the ones keeping track of US. Now, I don't see how anyone could keep track of their child. There are many different ways to log on to anything from anywhere. Parents today have it much harder for internet monitoring. I definitely don't want to upload my driver's license to many different websites, but I understand keeping children safe. Maybe we just don't give kids a smartphone until they turn 16 or something. But then you run the risk of your child becoming an outcast in an ever-evolving digital world. I think the solution is to just not have children and not worry about it. Back to the internet Wild West days. Story 59. Do I support banning? Hard to say. As others point out, it is not a great idea to have the government involved with verifying ages on the internet. Do I think we need to find a way to get people under 14 and maybe even older off the internet? Absolutely. It is destroying our minds and society. Story 60. Being on the internet as a young teenager was instrumental in me not trusting a single other human being for the rest of my life. Kept me safe. Parents need to step up and educate their children. Stop trying to protect people from themselves. If politicians were serious about this issue, they would not allow people over 60 on the internet either. That demographic is being scammed out of their life savings at an unbelievable rate. By the same logic, they should not be allowed to own phones, use the internet, or buy gift cards. Story 61. As a parent, I will ban my children from social media. However, if you are a parent and want social media in your children's lives, go for it. Social media requires a great deal of maturity and self-awareness to gain more benefits than drawbacks. Story 62. No, and I would be a hypocrite to say yes. I have been on the internet since I was 12 and had MySpace and YouTube accounts. Maybe people should teach children about the risks of social media usage. I do not know. Story 63. Yes, because their meme game is weak. Not actually, though. It is hard to implement, and parents should raise their children well enough for it to be a non-issue. Story 64. You weren't supposed to use Facebook under the age of 16, and guess what? All of us claim to be 99 years old. Do I agree with the ban? Absolutely. Children do not belong on social media. Do I think it can be enforced? No, I think people will lie. Story 65. Yes. Children under 14 should not be on social media yet, as it exposes them to pressures and content they are not ready for. Let them enjoy childhood first. Story 66. I would go so far as to say 18. Social media has no social benefits. It is a tool to advertise continuously. It is closer to cigarettes than any other product. Story 67. Discord already does it. Why can't Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube do the same? We cannot rely on all parents to do a good job at parenting. Let me remind you that half of parents are less competent than the average. Story 68. 100% yes. Too many children suffer from anxiety and depression today. I foresee the age limitation reducing that significantly. Story 69. I support completely deactivating all social media for everyone. Internet discussion forums such as Reddit can remain. I suppose everyone has a different interpretation of what social media actually is. Story 70. Social media such as Facebook or Instagram presents challenges. It is difficult for adults to self-regulate and avoid many inherent hazards. Children lack the tools to avoid getting swept up. Starting use later than age 14 would not be harmful. Regarding TikTok, it is important to consider research from experts. However, short-form videos may not be ideal for development. They seem to shorten attention spans and hinder the ability to engage with longer presentations. This has been observed in adults, and limited exposure to children who use it regularly shows concerning results. Sites like Reddit and YouTube are different. The internet provides access to information. These sites offer valuable resources. For example, YouTube has instructional videos, and Reddit hosts communities for various topics. Growing up with restricted information can be limiting. These sites may offer alternative perspectives that help individuals improve their situations. Regulating such websites without infringing on legitimate users requires careful thought and consideration. Current regulatory bodies may not be adequately prepared for this responsibility. Story 71. I support restrictions implemented by parents, not surveillance by corporations and government to determine whether you should have it or not. Story 72. I do not know what the solution is, but I am 100% certain we have made a mistake as a society by giving our children essentially unfettered access to smartphones and the internet at such young ages. As parents, we can try to put restrictions and filters on it and supervise its use, but it is not enough. Story 73. Many answers say, no, parents should do it. However, this is a major issue because parents are not addressing it, and little is likely to change that. Ideally, parents should be responsible for teaching their children about the harms and dangers of excessive online presence. The reality is that parents often do not understand these harms, do not care, or are too negligent to educate their children. In most cases, it is likely a combination of all three. It is difficult to quantify the harm precisely, but spending an hour on any social media site reveals that excessive use can negatively affect the brain. Young people often consume much more than an hour daily. Prolonged engagement with these platforms changes how they think and perceive the world, making it clear that excessive use can have long-term effects. Since the behavior is harmful and parents are not taking responsibility, oversight becomes necessary. Many people complain about privacy and anonymity but regularly consent to tracking, data sharing, and location monitoring by apps and websites. They only object when questioned directly, willingly sacrificing privacy behind the safety of their phone screen. However, oversight alone is not a complete solution. Young people can find ways to bypass restrictions, and mental maturity at age 14 is limited. The problem is far more complex than age verification can solve. Oversight can help but must be combined with content moderation. Parents must fulfill their role, and young people need to become more knowledgeable, which requires improved parenting. Platforms should stop promoting harmful content simply because the algorithm favors engagement, which creates its own problems. The unfortunate truth is that social media can be self-destructive, and users often engage deeply with damaging content. Story 74. You cannot simply take devices away or ban everything that could be harmful. Instead, you have to guide children on what is appropriate and what is not, and keep checking in on what they are doing. They need to learn how to use technology responsibly. So a no cell phone, no tablet, no computer rule is not effective. They must become internet savvy and understand social media to succeed as adults. Parents need to put in the effort to stay up to date on technology, learn their children's slang, and remain involved in who their friends are and what they are doing. I have 3 children. One is an adult living independently, one is in college, and one is in high school. We are not perfect. They made mistakes, got into trouble, and faced consequences. Part of parenting is guiding them through these experiences so they learn before becoming adults and facing adult consequences. Story 75. I fully support this. In my country, it feels like everyone has become much less intelligent in the span of 10 years. It is the kind of ignorance you would not think possible. People say things like, I voted for this actor for a Senate position because he is handsome. They vote for people who go against their own interests, Story 76. No, not because it is a bad idea to get children off social media, but because it is effectively impossible to enforce. Attempting to enforce it would give governments and corporations powers they fundamentally should not have. This should be something that parents enforce. It should be normalized and highly publicized that social media is highly detrimental to childhood social development. The social norm should be that only neglectful parents allow their children to use social media or be involved in it in any way. Story 77. I support a ban for the following reasons. 1. Brain development and mental health. At 14 years old and under, the brain, especially areas tied to impulse control, emotional regulation, and identity, is still developing. Social media exploits these vulnerabilities, increasing anxiety, depression, and body image issues at a critical stage of psychological formation. 2. Addiction and dopamine hijack. Platforms are engineered to be addictive, using likes and notifications to manipulate dopamine pathways. Children are especially susceptible, leading to compulsive use, reduced attention spans, and impaired real-world social skills. 3. Exposure to harmful content. Even with filters, children encounter inappropriate materials such as sexual content, violence, and encouragement of self-harm. Algorithms do not protect them. They often feed harmful content based on engagement rather than safety. 4. Predation and exploitation. Children are frequent targets for online predators and manipulators. No amount of parental oversight or application settings can eliminate the risk when the child is actively engaged on the platform. 5. Erosion of innocence and childhood. Social media accelerates maturity artificially, dragging children into adult-like social comparison, political discourse, and performance culture before they are emotionally equipped. 6. Permanent digital footprint. Children make poor decisions, but the internet does not forget. A 12-year-old's joke or mistake can haunt them for life in college admissions or employment due to screenshots in search engines. 7. Loss of real-world interaction. Social development requires face-to-face interaction. Social media stunts this by replacing nuanced human contact with curated personas and digital feedback loops. In short, social media offers children no essential benefit and exposes them to measurable, preventable harm. A ban protects their minds, safety, and future. Story 78. No, that just means you have to identify everybody else. Forget that. What happened to anonymity on the internet? Story 79. Proponents cite potential negative impacts on mental health, such as increased risk of depression, anxiety, and body image issues, as well as concerns about cyberbullying, grooming, and exposure to harmful content. Story 80. Very much so. No child should be on the internet unsupervised, and no one younger than 13 should be near social media. The power of the internet is that it is unregulated and decentralized. Take a look at Snowden, the Arab Spring, and the current buzz around the Epstein files as examples of why it is so important to protect the internet from children, not the other way around. Story 81. I support the ban on unsupervised social media activity for persons aged 13 to 15 since children aged 10 to 12 cannot access it legally. If something happened, such as the child seeing inappropriate content, the parents would be held liable. Once a teen reaches 15 or 16, depending on maturity, supervision requirements should be lifted, as a 16-year-old is usually self-aware enough not to accept digital content from strangers. Story 82. No. I grew up in a rural area with limited resources. The internet saved me from becoming a brainwashed follower, and do not kid yourself. That is exactly why there is such a clamor to ban it now under the claim that it makes children unhappy and anxious. It is about silencing them and restricting their access to any source of information outside of their parents and local influencers. Story 83. No. Children need to talk things over with other children, and they need the freedom to socialize online, away from the controlling, possibly abusive or prying eyes of parents, teachers, pastors, siblings, and others. They are not babies. Parents should install filters and parental controls and talk about their concerns regarding drugs, bullying, and sex. They should not completely restrict their access. Story 84. I also favor banning social media for anyone over 50 as well. Seniors are as toxic as younger users and much more gullible. Story 85. I support parents being held accountable for their children's online safety, including legally. I do not support a surveillance state. Story 86. Why can't we get public, non-religious community centers and spaces back? Why can't cities be walkable again? Why can't we start helping kids find community? We need to fix the many issues that force people to seek connection online rather than in person. It's also worth noting that not everyone can make friends with the people in their daily lives and community. Some people only have the internet and social media because it is their only option. Queer kids, in particular, feel the brunt of this. This climate pushes them into isolation from their own community, both in person and online. I think this is ridiculous. We keep having discussions like these while leaving out the demographic it affects. I would have killed myself at 13 out of sheer loneliness. Finding the online warriors community saved my life, at least until I was able to find better friends in real life. So yeah, I am heavily against it. Story 87. I support it, but not because I actually want the ban. I agree bans are foolish and parents need to parent, but here is the thing. Most parents do not do a good job, original poster. Silly bans like these at least signal to those irresponsible parents that culturally, we agree this is something you need to pay attention to. Many people assume what is legal is moral, and what is illegal is immoral. Story 88. This is another example of people claiming that parents should make parenting decisions, but setting rules when those decisions differ from their own. No child should be roaming the internet without supervision or the ability to talk to a parent about what they are doing and seeing. Trying to hide uncomfortable topics from children is worse than having open conversations because when they eventually encounter these topics, they will be unprepared to handle them. We were largely unsupervised growing up, and while that had some benefits, there was still a lot of negative content that was not discussed. The advent of the internet made much of this more public, but it certainly existed before then. Story 89. No, it is up to the parents if they want their children on the internet. If the parents are not monitoring their children on social media, it is the parents' fault. Just because the current generation is doom scrolling does not mean the whole population needs to suffer the consequences. Story 90. Absolutely. I do not need to list reasons, but my children do not need 1,000 random voices telling them what is or is not right. Story 91. I was on the internet at a very young age, but it gave me significant character development. So no, I cannot ban the number of everlasting memes my child might miss out on. Story 92. No, it is the parents' job to regulate what their children are doing. It is not that platforms should start doing it, but that parents need to be more conscious of their children's internet usage. Legislation and artificial intelligence tools to verify age are not the answers. Story 93. Should just ban it, period. It has done more to destroy our species' sanity and brain capabilities than any drug or religion. Story 94. I do in theory. I just think that we do not have good ways of verifying age without restricting everyone, making the internet less free in the process. That is the main hurdle. If I could magically make it so anyone under 14 would not be able to access social platforms, I would do it. I have seen how much damage it can do to people born around 2005, and I imagine it can be even worse now. Story 95. Well, yes, because think this way. Fewer children equals fewer pedophiles on platforms like TikTok or Instagram. Honestly, why should they be on the internet anyway? I remember when I was 14, I argued with my parents about why I should be allowed to be on the internet all day, and they didn't allow me to. Now, I completely understand why. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.